Engaging Red Chinese aggressors. Red Chinese threat detected. Red Chinese orbital strike imminent. All personnel should reach minimum safe distance immediately.
What's up, YouTube Revolution? ZombfectedGaming 349 at your fingertips. So today I want to talk a bit about the Fallout lore with the Chinese Communist Reds in the Fallout universe. Reason is because with today's real-life society, the way it can be, I really want to know, will they still go forward with any type of villain story for the Chinese Communist Reds in the Fallout universe? First off, let's recap a little bit of the history with the tensions that the United States of America and China have had between each other that led to the Great War in 2077. Let's start with where the tension started, with America and China fighting over resources like fossil fuels and etc., which led to the events in the Fallout universe called the Resource Wars. This is better known as the Sino-American War. Also, fun fact, the United States of America started annexing my country Canada in the year 2059, and eventually Canada ceased to exist as a nation in 2072. The entirety of the Great White North ended up in the hands of the United States of America, so this means the state of Alaska, which is right next to northern Canada, is now a part of mainland United States of America. But the reasonings for America's annexation of Canada was because of Canada's natural resources and crude oil fields and to protect it from the Chinese Communist Reds. Having Canada be America's new mainland United States of America and having the Alaskan state be attached to mainland United States also helps establish the Anchorage frontline for the United States military to keep the commies away from getting into the heart of mainland America. Now let's talk about the Liberation of Anchorage, or also known as the Battle of Anchorage, which began in the winter of 2066. This campaign is all about conditions deteriorating between the United States and China, and a military presence in Alaska was established to prevent a possible invasion across the Bering Strait. Also, with increasingly scarce oil reserves, a last deep sea deposit below the Pacific Ocean was claimed by China before allegedly being sabotaged by American Special Forces. This strained relationships between the United States and China, and it started to spiral out of control, and sanctions between the United States and China began, and eventually leading to the Resource Wars and the Sino-American War in Alaska. The Chinese invasion of Alaska was led by General Jin Wei of the People's Liberation Army of China. This event can actually be played in a Fallout 3 DLC through a simulation being controlled by the Fallout 3 Lone Wanderer protagonist. The DLC is called Fallout 3 Operation Anchorage. This event was definitely one of the most important events with the conflict between the United States and China in the Fallout franchise. But going forward was just pre-war stories about the United States and China's conflict through pre-war stories on terminals and encountering red Chinese communist schools in the Fallout games. You can also wear Chinese communist power armor, and some propaganda can be found and more Chinese Reds activity, etc. The presence of the Chinese Communist Reds are very important to the lore of the Fallout franchise and was a major sparking factor into why the Great War of 2077 started, with full-scale nuclear conflict and sending the world into a nuclear Fallout holocaust for 2 centuries. This lore is very important to the lore of the Fallout video game franchise, but now Fallout is more than just a video game franchise and is now a film franchise for Amazon Prime with a television series, which was fantastic with its first season. We are now going to get into minor spoiler territory for the Fallout television show, and it's about the lack of bringing up the Chinese Communist Reds. Most of the show doesn't bring up anything Chinese at all, but there's a pre-war scene where one of our main characters, Cooper Howard, who eventually becomes the main ghoul character in the show, says this.
Miss Tech, West-Tec.
It's a defense contractor.
Oh, I'm very familiar with you guys. You designed the T-45 power armor.
Your first of its kind. You know, I oversaw the rollout. You know, the design flaws were ridiculous, but they sure looked great.
I wore the T-45 when we almost lost the great state of Alaska to the Reds. Those design flaws of yours cost a lot of good men and women their lives.
This character, Cooper Howard, who mentioned the Reds, was a movie actor in the pre-war time before the nukes were dropped, and it's very interesting to me how he said he wore the T-45 power armor in Alaska and mentioned its design flaws just below the chest plate, which resulted in many American soldiers getting killed in Alaska. But what's very interesting is how Cooper is more than just an actor. He was a real soldier fighting for his country. His acting in these gunslinger movies and being a soldier must have prepared him to be a ghoul gunslinger over 200 years later into the apocalypse. But back to talking about the Chinese Reds. That very moment in the show was literally the hidden subtle moment of mentioning the Chinese Reds in the Fallout universe, but for the show. We know that both the show and the games are connected in the same universe, but new lore got created in the show for villains during the pre-war time. Listen to this scene in the show during a conference that Vault-Tec was doing.
There's a lot of earning potential with the end of the world. But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
By dropping the bomb ourselves. A nuclear event would be a tragedy, but also an opportunity. Perhaps the greatest opportunity in history, because when we are the only ones left, there will be no one to fight. A true monopoly. This is our chance to make war obsolete. Because in our current societal configuration, which took shape without intentional guidance, we have friction. We have conflict, and we have war. And war, well, war never changes.
That was Barb Howard, Cooper's wife. She works for Vault-Tec, and when she said about dropping bombs ourselves, that means Vault-Tec was planning for this apocalypse to happen as well. They wanted this apocalypse to happen to wipe out all of the other factions across the world, so Vault-Tec could remain as the only sole surviving faction on the planet, so there's no more competition in political ideologies that leads to war. Because war never changes. So yeah, China wasn't just the creators of making for this apocalypse to happen by launching nukes at America. Vault-Tec launched nukes probably at America and wherever else around the world to wipe out other factions across humanity. And in the end, Vault-Tec was wrong, and there's still plenty of factions on the surface fighting each other because humans can populate like cockroaches, and more political ideologies across factions of humanity keep happening, and this leads to war, and war never changing. So yeah, this is, I believe, the Amazon Prime show version of introducing a new villain's perspective of who else dropped the bombs during the pre-war time period to avoid using the Chinese communists in the show. Like I said earlier on in the video, I believe it could be because of society today and trying to avoid major controversy. But does this mean China is still canon? I believe absolutely, but just told in the games and instead of the Amazon Prime show perspective. Now I want to talk about why I think the Amazon show wants to focus on the perspective of Vault-Tec being the villains during the pre-war time and not the Chinese Reds. I think it's because since Amazon is a company that sells a bunch of stuff and delivers stuff that potentially have been made in China, and since China is a major supplier of making stuff. We know almost everything is made in China, and if Amazon creates controversy with China with the Fallout show, I believe it could have made it that China would have not have wanted to do business with Amazon anymore, and that will probably be bad for Amazon stocks on the stock market. This is just my guess. I could be wrong, it was just my curious guess. But anyways, that's it for this Fallout lore video. Feel free to correct me on anything I might have gotten wrong since I do know Fallout lore a bit, but I'm not an entire expert on the Fallout lore. Some of the Fallout lore can be confusing at times, we definitely all know that. But consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel, and ding that bell icon really hard so I can always stay within fast reach of your fingertips when new uploads arrive. ZombfectedGaming 349 over and out.